Together.
Yes.
So welcome back, everybody. We are here for our subcommittee meeting, our monthly subcommittee meeting of the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee of our Racial Justice Oversight body. And we have quorum for our subcommittee members. And I figured, given the size of the room, we can each unmute and just say hello, our org. And we'll keep it at that so we can get through our business. And there will be the chance for public comment if anyone wants. But hi, Cheryl. We're just going around the virtual room here. And I'll lead off by saying, I'm Jeff. I'm with the Public Defender's Office, the Deputy Public Defender, but I'm sitting here in this subcommittee as a steering committee member of the Racial Justice Coalition. So not a county agency, but community member. And glad we're all here. Let me pass the welcome or invitation to Kiki.
Good afternoon. I'm Kiki Williams. I am a probation manager in this county, specifically responsible for prevention, juvenile placement, adult and juvenile investigations.
Hi, Kiki. Hi, Ronell.
Yeah, Ronell Ellis, Reentry Network, Health Right 360, Field Operations Coordinator. Glad to be here.
How about Melvin?
Afternoon, Melvin Russell. I'm the Assistant Chief Probation Officer. It's good to see you all.
You too, Melvin. And Chris?
Good afternoon, Chris James, W. Hayward Burns Institute. Glad to be here.
Good to see you as always. Monique?
I am Monique Tate with the Office of Reentry and Justice, and I'm happy to be here with you all too.
Hi, Monique. Nicole?
Hi, Nicole Popchik. I'm also here with the Office of Reentry and Justice. Thank you.
How about Jill? Hi.
Hi, Jill Ray, Office of Supervisor Candace Anderson.
Glad you're here. Let's see, Cheryl?
Buenas tardes, Cheryl Sadith. I'm with everybody, and chiefly with the Racial Justice Coalition. And I'm just going to repeat after everybody else. I'm also happy to be here. Muy feliz. Thank you.
Let's see. How about Amy? Hi, Amy.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm in transit, so trying to connect by my phone. I am Amy Price. I'm with the Zellerback Family Foundation, which is looking to engage more deeply in Contra Costa County. So I am here to learn and really appreciate the opportunity and happy to be here. Thanks.
Terrific. Glad you're here. And Dale, hi.
Hi. Yeah, I'm a member of the Community Advisory Board and a member of the Advisory Council on Aging, and just interested in a lot of different aspects within the county.
Well, great. I'm glad that we're here. This is my awkward moment of like, we went through everyone, I think, that's in the room. Everyone had an opportunity to say hello. So let's see. I hesitate to go through, but maybe it is worth taking a moment through our introductory docs. So if I'm pulling up that, let me get the right document that I want to share with everyone. There's sometimes just a few quick slides that I'll bring up when we have persons joining us that it's a new participating in the space, and it's basically just going through how did we get here to this subcommittee, the oversight body, where do we fall within the bigger structure. So I won't take long with it, but would just pull that up as I think it can be sometimes useful. And I see that Ed has joined us. Hi, Ed. we would just finished going around the circle and introducing ourselves and the org that we're appearing with, if any. So welcome you to say hello if you'd like.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ed Randall, Director of Field Service from Probation. I know my lighting is bad, so I'll probably stay off camera, but good to see everybody.
Good to see you too. Thanks. I'm glad that you're with us. So I won't try to take too long on this thing, but I will see if I have intro links. Yes. Okay. Apologize for that delay, but I think sometimes it can be worth taking the moment. Okay. Well, this first, the agenda link you don't need because we have that in the chat here, but I will invite folks if they want to pull up information from these links, which just gives a little bit more background of the oversight body came from the task force, which was before, which in turn came from community organizing and advocacy. This was a response to community members calling for having a space to hold these issues and make progress. This link is to an org chart and just kind of showing where we fall in this whole process. Lots of persons who have decision-making power within their respective agencies. And also we're an advisory group that can make recommendations and requests to the Board of Supervisors, but we can't make the policy changes as a group by way of vote. However, as I was saying, lots of leaders and agencies here and the ability to make changes independently. Different groups have that. Past agendas you see there, and then links to our meetings, which is a really great update, I think, to be able to have access to all the content, what was said, and that context really can make a difference in our ability to make progress. So I'm going to just copy these and add to our chat. So that if you're wanting to follow up in that way, you can. And I'll move from this and pull up our agenda again. Which I think would bring us to, beyond my just saying welcome again, announcements and public comment. I'll note that I have an announcement, which is raising an issue, or maybe it falls within public comment. I think this is probably the appropriate area since it's not on agenda, and I did want to flag it as some information I just thought was relevant for our consideration passing around. But I've been doing a lot of talking. So let me see if anyone else had any announcements that they wanted to before I just continue on speaking. Cheryl, I saw you unmute.
Actually, sorry, I'm switching.
No worries.
I have to switch devices.
Sure. All good. Well, if there isn't anything further, there was I was contacted by a community member about an issue. So I'm not certain if that person would be attending this meeting. It doesn't seem so. So I'll just share the issue that had been raised or the concern through announcements, and we all go to our respective spaces and see how that may shake out. But basically the issue being that there's been an expansion of eligibility for consideration resentencing for cases related to felony murder. So some of you may know that the situation of old laws had been, even if you had not been actively engaged in use of a firearm or having in some other way caused bodily harm to a person, if it was a foreseeable, if it was a likely result of the action, the getaway driver, the someone who's to look out, something like that, may be serving a life sentence on a murder conviction, despite the fact that they weren't the quote unquote active participant in that sense. Well, there have been changes in the law in this area, and it's expanded eligibility for resentencing. Basically, if they were prosecuted these days, you couldn't be sentenced to convicted or sentenced to murder under those circumstances. So now there's the possibility of reconsideration. And it was, the issue raised was whether there's been robust implementation of that change for the persons who clearly would not have been eligible for murder prosecution. There may be, and according to the information, which again, I don't have this first person, but I did want to flag it because it did seem of concern to me, and maybe where else would you go but to our space that could lead others. There are people that are serving longer sentence now that if they got consideration, it seems like they would be eligible and entitled to perhaps reduction in sentence and or release from prison. So long way of saying, community member raised the concern of, hey, I think this isn't rolling out the way that it should. And I thought there were supposed to be this expanded criteria for people who are serving sentences that aren't really permitted under the law anymore. So we're not here for conversation with the district attorney, but this is a space for community engagement. And I'd invited that person to say, hey, if you're concerned on this, welcome you to be there. And I'll just flag it if you're not able to, as something that have been brought up as community of related to justice systems, practice, enforcement. Jill, I see that you'd sent that link. Was that related to the same? Thank you for adding that. And happy for you to unmute if you want to just mention what you're adding, or you may be typing in the chat now. So right, that I won't spend more time on it. It's not on the agenda, and perhaps others have more info on it. We'll see in the different spaces. But
I just added it to the chat, Jeff, because I don't want to get into a discussion since it's not on the agenda, but on February 1st, the Board of Supervisors did approve a 3-year grant that was received by the PD, the public defender, and the DA for a 3-year pilot project, and it's called the Resentencing Pilot Project. So that was approved on February 1st.
That's important context. Thank you. And it's education to me too. So as Jill was saying, it's not on agenda, but it is something that perhaps to be aware of. And right from my vantage point, reforms like these have implications for racial justice and practice in Contra Costa. So perhaps at a future meeting, if not in this space, to be raised in other accountability and policy reform spaces in the county. That said, I don't have another announcement that I wished to make. Anyone else in the room, our digital meeting here, have something they wanted by way of announcement, and can also just transition to public comment. So falling in either category, you could be saying this is an announcement I have to make, or this is public comment. But we've reached that point on the agenda. If there's something you wanted to say and it's not already on our agenda items, I invite you to say so now. Taking that brief pause, not hearing anything right now. There'll be the chances throughout to contribute your perspective, input. So we're really trying to avoid, we've had an intentional part of the subcommittee that we don't want to be too formal and opportunities to give input. So if you feel like you wanted to weigh in on something, we're going to try to have every window that we can for you so that you can have the chance to participate. All right, the record of actions from last time. I would move ahead to. And I know that we've had the link to the agenda in the chat more than one time, so it's there, which is great. And I'm just quickly going through this. We're looking through our agenda from, or our record of actions rather, from February 10. And I don't want to make everyone dizzy by scrolling up to the top, but I think we may be approving both record of actions from the 10th meeting and then also our special meeting. Is that right, Nicole?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's first just roll through the February 10. That was our regular subcommittee meeting. Folks have this here, and of course we have the follow-up background stuff and the video, if there was any question. But sometimes these basics of, I was here, not reflected or something like that. I didn't notice anything myself, but if
Well,
anyone
I was there, but I wasn't on the panel. I was the public.
Oh, but at least for this one, I think we have you.
The other one, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I see. Okay. I'm noting that change that I do remember that you were there and we should include that. And just on, excuse me, the meeting from the 10th, was there any change to this meeting that anyone wanted to make? Okay, so then if there's no discussion, no changes, I would ask for a motion to approve the record of actions from our last subcommittee meeting. This is the one from February 10th.
I will.
Thank you, Kiki. And a second? I always forget. I can do it. I can be the second, right? Can't I? Just to expedite. Yes, I'll second the motion. I think so. It's Kiki's motion. I second it. Any discussion on this before we take a vote on approving the record of actions? Hearing no requests for further discussion, I would ask that we call the vote then.
Beth,
Yes.
Kiki,
Yes.
Renell. Did we lose Renell?
Yes, I'm here, yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you. A motion passed unanimously. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, moving right along here. We're pulling up the February 16th meeting, which was the special session or special meeting of our subcommittee. And this was the data session, the community event that we had been planning for and did have since our last subcommittee meeting. So I'll roll through this and note that, Jill, I note your absence in this notes too, because you were present. So proposing to make that change, and anything beyond that that anyone has to modify?
Sorry, I was under the impression the last vote was for both, or maybe
Oh.
I was wrong.
Well,
Did I misinterpret that?
let's see. I think it becomes a moot point if we're conforming with. So Kiki and Renell, is that to your satisfaction too? The vote was approving both of these with the one change of Jill being reflected present. Does that sound all right?
Yes, I think that's what I thought I was doing as well.
There we go. Thank you.
Was I not here at this meeting, Jeff?
You were you not?
I think I was here.
I think you were too.
Cheryl was at the 16th. She was at the special meeting.
Yes. Okay.
And I was,
well,
and I don't know if I see my name on the other one either.
let's look at the first there. I'm glad you caught. Okay, so you
I
are
was on
present
that
on
one.
this.
Yeah.
I just wanted to state that for the special meeting, I purposely did not put because of the type of meeting it was, all the people that were there from the public standpoint. I didn't even put myself there, even though I was there. But I'm happy to add everyone and go back to our report to pull everybody, but there were so many people there. It would have been a really long list. That's why I put various members. Just, it was on purpose. It wasn't a miss. It was just done like that on purpose. So happy to amend it however you'd like to see.
The only thing is I'm not a community member. So it says various community members, which I understand, but I'm not a community member. So.
Yeah.
And I don't think Cheryl was there as necessarily a community member either. And you did mention Shayla Bonner, so as others present.
I only mentioned her because she was the facilitator. That was the only reason.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jill, and I think it was only because Jeff asked us to speak, and I think we were speaking on behalf of here. So
Yeah.
that's all I was gonna say.
Sure. That, I think it makes sense how, I can understand how the notes were prepared in this way. So that makes sense what you were saying, Nicole. And I also think we should reflect in the minutes because of representing both Jill and Cheryl as having been there, with not meaning that each other person, not that every individual would have to be added, as much as I just think those two changes that I saw.
And Nicole, you could put me under staff just so it doesn't cause more confusion because I am officially staff, not necessarily the ORJ.
Got it. Thank you.
Great. Just like as in this, the February 12th notes, I would think. Okay. So now we've double clarified that with those changes, adding Jill and Cheryl to the 16th meeting, our vote is cleared this. So moving ahead, let's go to our pull up. I think this brings us to our JJCC standing update from Kiki, but right. Yes. Hi, Kiki. Inviting you to educate us on what may have happened since last time.
Well, nothing, because as I mentioned, probably a couple meetings ago now, it's been a while, and we switched to an every other month schedule. So last time when we met on the 10th of February, we had just met on the 7th. So we actually don't meet again until April 4th.
Got it. Okay. That is, I'm remembering now that you had said that. So thanks for reminding us and clarifying that that's where we stand with progress, everything. Emil, I see you're joining us too. Hi. Welcome to introduce name and what's brought you here. Just meaning either org or as a concerned community member. And we just gone through the room in doing that if you'd like.
I apologize. Did you say you wanted me to introduce myself?
If you'd like, just inviting you to.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'm Emma Lowell. I'm a community member and mom of a young biracial incarcerated man in Contra Costa, and also a public school teacher. So I'm jumping on late because I'm on parent-teacher conferences, but I'll be here as long as I can.
Thank you for being here, Emil, and thanks for introducing to the group. So we were just in our agenda of having clarified there wasn't an update since our last meeting because at this point JJCC is having its every other month meeting. So we can expect to have when we return in April that there would have just been a recent JJCC meeting, I think. Okay, so then unless we're prepared to be able to vote, but I don't think we need any vote there. And if anyone had some other matter to add regarding JJCC, unlikely because there wasn't a meeting, we would move ahead to debriefing our data forum, which maybe I'll just say parenthetically, I think we could stand to have this as a regular thing when there's something that we've completed and we haven't had the chance to reflect on. So for example, after the quarterly meetings, sometimes I think there could stand to be some follow-up on the discussion that happened at the quarterly, so things don't get lost. So we don't need that at this moment as much as we're having a post-event discussion to follow up on the things that were said, and we're not just moving to some other item without having a chance to learn from, capitalize on the things that happen there, and prepare to make changes as appropriate. So before we go through attachments, folks' thoughts on how it went, pluses and minuses? I know I thought Ronell and Shayla were fabulous, and that was major, but okay, that was my input. And then others' thoughts on how it went?
That's because you're generous and you know me, but yeah, I mean, we can always do better. I mean, I always look to do better. So just want to, make sure that we did provide the information for folks. And I personally, I always look to do better, but yeah, I was happy with what took place because, it was, we were just working with what we had, and just try to do, work to the best of our ability at that time. So that's my comment on it, and I appreciate everybody too. Shayla, everybody, Jeff was a blessing as well. Oh, you guys.
Thanks, Ronell. Others' thoughts? I invite constructive criticism, things that could be done better. Let's see, I'm just seeing a chat. Amy, thanks for being with us. I understand you need to leave.
Okay, I'll jump in and hopefully sort of start the conversation a bit. Overall, I think that this was a good meeting. I think there was a decent turnout given the turnaround time. It was a relatively short amount of time from the invites actually going out, which is not, any person's fault. It's just, it took us a while to sort of get everything together and finalized such that, we were ready to sort of send those invites out and keep the date and, all of that sort of stuff. So hopefully for the next time, we're not sort of running so close. In fact, I think we don't even have to, we can provide a range of time that we might want to shoot for. And that way we're not sort of up against it in terms of trying to get the information out in time, and we have time to promote and to think about how to coordinate those efforts, right? And what the sort of concerted effort to get the word out should be. But I think for the event itself, it went well. Heard some comments in a recent data subcommittee meeting about folks wanting to make sure that certain, sort of fine line distinctions were made with the data, right? Mainly around showing, say, the Black population, like the percentage of the Black population represented in custody going up, and making sure that folks understand that that doesn't necessarily mean that so overall, I think the admissions decreased over the last couple of years, but the disparity increased, which looks like a larger percentage of the people who are actually in custody were Black, which is why that number was increasing. And so folks speaking to that, I think the data subcommittee is going to be working to provide more takeaway language within graphics, which will help with that. But I think none of that changes the overall big picture of what we were talking about, and I think what community took away from, the information that was provided. But just pointing that out as far as constructive criticism, the other thing that I would say is I couldn't help but notice that we we sort of adopted this practice that I've seen in other meeting spaces in the county, and I'm not certain as to why, where people ask certain questions or have pointed comments that they want to make, and we kind of nod and say, thank you for saying that, and then we move on to the next thing. I think with, say, meetings even like this, that could be, you know, a more reasonable approach, but I think in a forum that's meant to sort of hear from and dialogue directly with community, there can be a missed opportunity there to be responsive. Not that you have to have the answers, right? There's some really tough questions being asked, right? So it's not like you have to have the answer or come up with the silver bullet solution to what someone's talking about. But I did think that there were instances where there's work that is currently underway or things that we are discussing or currently working toward that could have at least been highlighted or pointed out in response to some of the things that folks said, because we want to make sure that folks feel heard. I've talked within recent months about sort of giving presentations, as far as data requests and having like a similar sort of thing happen, and just wanting to make sure that within this group, that feels like, it just feels unsatisfying for you to, especially because some of the things that were being shared were really, deep, really emotional, folks and their families and family members have really been impacted. And so to kind of say, thank you so much for that comment. And I see somebody else's hand when they respond to that is not the best way to respond, particularly when you can say things like, yeah, so we in such and such subcommittee, we're actually working toward, this issue. We'll invite you to come, love to hear from you, or something like that. That's just a little bit more responsive. So I think we just need to be intentional about building a culture around having those types of responses, because otherwise we're just asking people to kind of show up and share, whatever these are real feelings, real emotions, real experiences that folks are having. And so we don't want to just kind of skate by these things that they are willing to discuss so publicly, in hopes that their sharing means something and materializes in some way down the line. So I would just point that out. I've said too many words about it. I don't want to give you guys the impression that I, thought this was, a terrible meeting or anything close to that. I think it was well done. And those are just a couple of sort of notes that I would point out for next time to make it even better. But given the time that we had, I think the information, I think the turnout, I think the intentionality about how the space was opened, making it feel like a more authentic community conversation and not like a meeting. And there are probably other avenues that we can explore for how to have a meeting like this where we're not maybe as worried about quorum and things like that. And, are we, how many people are gathered and all that sort of stuff. But I think for the first time out, this was pretty good. And I really appreciate everyone who contributed, everyone who showed up, after hours to be a part of it. And I think it only gets better from here. And there's the opportunity to really build some dialogue and hopefully some trust as well, as we continue to do these types of things.
Thank you, Chris. So much to say in response there. And before I say anything, Jill, I see your hand.
So to kind of piggyback on what Chris was just saying, which I think were all very, very wise words. I would say overall, the content of the meeting, as in the presenters and the information, was excellent. I do think, and we kind of touched on this prior, but I feel like it was a little rushed. So more planning going into the future on how that agenda should be set up and what the goal was. And I did ask about that. And I just feel like we had a date and we were going to go with it. And I think that they're just really being careful about how we're building a meeting to present complex information and allow gentleness and compassion to those people who show up. I can tell you the very first time I saw the data of our criminal justice system and our juvenile justice system, I was in shock. I was angry. I was so many different things. And, you know, this is many years later that I'm still here. So I recognize that that's a common feeling many people will have when they're first confronted with the data, and that's important to understand. And it's important for them to have a space to be angry and know that they're heard and that we're doing a great many things. Like you just brought up today, Jeff, something that you heard from the community, and we actually are already, you know, already working on that. And I think that's the case for a great many things in our county, but not necessarily responding to people like, oh, well, we're already doing that. Oh, we're already doing that. But to help them understand the importance of their feedback if we want them to keep coming back and sharing, which I think is critically important. And there's lots of ways to frame a meeting, and these types of meetings are not the best way to do so to get, I think, what you were trying to get. Unless, I mean, and that's where I still am not clear. Were you just trying to present information to the public, or were you trying to get public involvement and buy-in by the public to move forward? So there's lots of different ways to do that. And quorum is not an issue. There's formats. We could even do that virtually to address the quorum issue so that every single member could attend and it wouldn't affect quorum because you'd be in a webinar format or something along those lines. So I think there's lots of planning that can be done. This isn't the first time we've done something like this, so it's not like it's a heavy lift and something new. We've done these things many times before, and I think it's important to work on what's worked on the past as we're building to go forward into the future.
Thank you for that feedback, Jill. I think that's really valuable for us to have both yours and Chris and Renell already talking about the ways in which we could improve. And let me invite others to add thoughts, feedback, if anyone would like. And maybe just as I'm giving that moment to say that as we're debriefing or reflecting on the experience, I think it's fair to say that there was, following our meeting, some consideration, or following our subcommittee meeting, some consideration of maybe we ought to delay and reschedule, which is not an unreasonable instinct, I think, given all factors. And also in light of our having, at least as of our last subcommittee meeting, all said together and in our planning, we're going to go ahead and do this. Plus the time that Renell and Shayla, and Chris and I and others had spent preparing together. I think for a number of reasons that did make sense, especially in light of Shayla's very expected upcoming unavailability and wanting to respect her input and participation in the process, as well as Dante Clark, which I think everyone is agreeing was a terrific component of the event. So in terms of turnout and preparation, spreading the word, there's definitely more to do. And right, I think those are factors that weigh on whether it ought to have been delayed. And if we're in a similar position in the future, we'll have this as consideration of how much turnout there was given the planning time. And in terms of the purpose, what was the intention of the meeting? Well, my sense is that we did hash that out together at these meetings several different times, which it's not that I could say it in a sentence of what it was, but I think at least in these monthly spaces, we were routinely talking about honing in what is the purpose here and how we're trying to have it. So I think it was to share and also get input. But I do also agree that there's more that needs to be done in terms of how that can happen. And maybe my final just point in responding back, Chris, what you were saying, and Jill, what you're saying definitely lands with me, is that you can't invite someone to share their story and then, so thank you very much, on to the next, is not a way to build community and to have genuine relationships, which is going to be essential to have any chance at change in things. So I think I feel the awkwardness and the ineffectiveness of that reality. Somebody says something that was traumatic or vulnerable or whatever it is, and that there isn't a response back. I think some of it is probably just thin, if not natural, super common uncertainty, if not discomfort of how do I say, what do I say back? Plus, if you're in a space where it's not really designated who is going to respond to this comment, that can kind of fall as nobody's saying anything. So something for us to learn from, I think, moving forward, and just planning and facilitation isn't as though we had said in advance, Renell, Shayla, me, Chris, if somebody says something that's needing to have follow-up, here's how we're going to address it. So I think it's something we can learn from here when there is that kind of emotionally charged or a weighty moment, that we do take the time with it and not just move past, because those are opportunities for us to connect and really have folks see why reform is necessary when it's through the lens of someone's experience. Cheryl? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that part. And I think that what I wanted to know is that, because someone said something, and I think I may have saved the chat, but I got to go back and look. Because in the chat, there was just a lot, right? A lot of people saying things. What was the young man's name, the poet?
Dante.
Dante. Because even his poetry, and even after he spoke, he was feeling very raw after even his own comments, right? And then even after just the clip of the video, he was feeling some kind of way. And I think that one of the comments that sat with me the most was, what next? And so I asked this group the same thing. And I'm gonna ask the group next week, our diversion group, the same thing, what next? And then I will ask the data group in 2 weeks, the same thing. What next? What next, right? So we can let it sit with us, but then what next? Because there is one thing to, even if we would have given a response like you're talking about, is what next? There's only so much understanding or even overstanding or compassion that a community can tolerate without some real bona fide action behind the repeated action, negative actions or denigration or destruction of a community. After seeing at least the trial last Friday of the killer of Latimer, and now waiting to see what will happen with Tyrell Wilson's case, I think that the community is asking what next. So I think that deserves attention. Do we have another one of these? What's the follow-up to this community data forum? Do we send out something to the people who are attending that says, we hear you, we see you, and this is what our next steps are? Because I don't think it's right or fair to have this forum and not to follow up. So what's next? That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl. Well, yes, I think I was hearing from all sorts of different sides. Why just this? What else hasn't happened? Why don't we have more? And what is going on with these promises, these commitments earlier? So, for example, there were a few different times that I recall people talking about jury. I had floated it, but also Renell was mentioning and others talking about, well, like, that's a really important gateway to the system and how it perpetuates. And wasn't this one of our recommendations early? So I think that can be a follow-up, as I'm seeing from the meeting, is we were hearing from community members that they want follow-up on this. So that can be an ask potentially to data group and or at our quarterly meetings to be reporting back that was a takeaway thing, that people were wanting to hear about it. Now, even if it is, well, that wasn't full capture of the community and we had only turnout that we had. That said, it is representative of who had attended, and that for the weight that it has, I think that's something that I was hearing as people wanting to know that reforms that had been agreed upon, and that was one of our recommendations for change, what's happened and an update. I think also I was hearing sheriff oversight from different voices at the meeting that came up more than once, and that I was hearing that in response to, wasn't there already a vote for this, which we did have at our quarterly, and also that in response to some of the numbers, concerns about arrests, for example, which is really what we were looking at, people saying, what's going on with oversight, because that's reviewing the practices that are there. So if we have takeaway points, that would be another that I was hearing from community, that they wanted action, follow through on that, and that when we go to our quarterly meeting and also the different subcommittee spaces, to be saying that was something that people are not letting go. We want to, they're wanting to hear that progress is being made on it. Plus more data. Those, I think that would be my sort of shorthand on. And there was a lot more, and I'm just picking a few and inviting others to say, well, I remember these two, but why not more numbers, right? And this is just arrests, which is true, and it's only coming from sources that would have been public anyway. True. Plus, we don't have it from other agencies. Even some of the agencies that had provided weren't in the presentation. Okay, can be improved upon, meaning we didn't go through all of the rich data that we had from probation. However, that had to do, I think, somewhat with it being up on the data website. So that's maybe more detail on that last point, but that there were responses back that shouldn't we have more data than this, which leads me to want to pivot to our attachments to this item on the agenda, because we were looking at the data that we have in the context of like policy reforms, but so some of it is like, what do we do with the responses and what policy reforms do we make? And then I think also part of it is, how do we get more data that will be kind of fueling this as we move forward? What other sources are already there? I found that the attachment that came my way through a coworker who got it in a different space, I felt like this is actually a little bit more robust than what I thought we were presenting, which isn't criticism of us as much as just, I didn't know that this stuff was available. So let me pull that up. It doesn't have all of the content that we did, but in some ways it is more. So folks are seeing now, I have my little demographic reference data. People seeing that up here? Got my cursor. Yeah, bless you. Okay, so This is similar, our population estimate info, but as I'm going down even further, now we're getting into, this is COCO specific data, and this is 2020 info. So this is relevant stuff. This is more content than perhaps and details than we were having access to before, which I'm thinking that this Board of State and Community Corrections website may be a valuable source for finding the sorts of things that we're wanting in terms of how do we get a breakdown, right, of the exact, for like these numbers are useful for us to have as I'm putting my cursor over here. Chris, to your point, are the overall numbers going down? No, this is showing that they are overall going down, right? Because 23,000, certainly less than 33. So if you look at your historic numbers, this is going to be updated all the time, because I think the context, as I understand it, is counties will put the updated info in here because they need to do so in order to obtain funding through AB 109 realignment dollars. So that's motivation to get the current info accurate in there because the money is tied to it. And it's obligatory. It's I think it's a prerequisite in order to continue to receive the funds. So we wouldn't even need to be digging to find this stuff because they have to post it. They, meaning our county and all of the other counties that are requesting funds, AB 109. This is daily populations in the jail, right? So this is the sort of stuff we want to have more of this, I think. Now, I have this as an attachment, and there's also a link in our agenda packet to where did this come from? And right, just to like close the loop a little bit more of, well, how did this even come to me? It was someone who was submitting an unrelated request for funding to the BSCC and said, you know, this is pretty detailed information about the county. So I was picking that up too and finding that. All right, and then this performance metrics also, not going to go through it line by line, but other than to say, yeah, this is some good content too. This is not old info, right? This is current stuff, and it has to do with basically the implications of bigger picture, other ways to split up and review the data. I think the different ways you can look at it can help better understand it. To like, again, go back to what Chris, you were saying is being able to respond, because if we know that, yes, the full numbers are going down, but the rate of disparity is either the same or greater, then we're prepared to respond, and it's not confusion that's coming. Because if someone is to say, but isn't it true that the numbers are going down? And our response back is, oh yeah, that's true. Without saying, yeah, but it's still more disparate. It's still a 2 times. So, you know, if anyone's getting the benefit, it's not African-American members of the community. It's the benefit that's coming in the reduction is really being disproportionately felt by already privileged group. Let's see. I am wary of having been talking for a long time and want to invite anybody to unmute as I'm going through this. This is, I'm just pulling up the last spreadsheet that I came across. This is also coming through published information on the BSCC website. So real detail here. The jail count on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, how many of those were felony, how many folks were in pretrial. That's beyond clearly the arrest data that we have. This is other relevant information. I'm going to put the links to how I got these in the chat. I see Jill's hand. So hi, Jill.
So I was just going to say, this is all great data. I feel like I've seen data like this before. A lot of BSCC grants have gone through and stuff over the years. So I think the biggest issue is who's going to analyze and put together the data. I think that's sort of the wall that we've hit. And I think at the last PPC meeting, there was a crack in the wall, if not the wall knocked down, in that the supervisors asked that the staffing of the RJOB be switched to the CAO's office if possible. And they asked the CAO to look at that to allow for that data analyzing to happen. That can't happen now in the ORJ because of the way the ORJ sits in probation. I'm hopeful that will free up the ability to gather the data and do more analysis and provide more robust data going forward. I think that the stopgap has been that lack of data analysis ability of other agencies.
Thank you for that update, Jill. That's relevant for us to be knowing, and maybe at least an important barrier.
Right. So, I mean, just to, because I left out one part, because the conversation has always been about this advisory body being housed in the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. And given it seems to be a super heavy lift to get that thing going, we didn't want to wait. So that the recommendation was sooner rather than later to transfer the authority to somewhere else that can provide that data analysis until the ORESJ is up and running.
Thank you for that additional context. Maybe I'll just say that that's information I wasn't aware of, that there would be that potential change, or it's going to be the change, perhaps, if I'm understanding. Does anyone have thoughts about that? Input on having that change and what it would mean for us? I don't know if there had been any sort of discussion in favor or opposed, or it was just kind of non-controversial. That's what's going to happen.
Well, Chris was in the meeting. He was the presenter of the RJOB item. So maybe he has some thoughts on that since he was present when they made that recommendation to the CAO.
Sure.
Not to put me on the spot or anything.
Right. No, not at all. Of course.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a pretty preliminary conversation, right? I think the nuts and bolts of that probably are still yet to be figured out. It's not like, I definitely didn't get from any of that discussion that there's like a timetable or that maybe you need to be thinking about asking different folks than the folks that you're currently reaching out to for support with this stuff for anything at this point. I'm certain that as more information becomes available, they will, the good folks at the ORJ will pass it along to us to let us know what's going on with that transition. But it certainly didn't seem to me like, yeah, so by, such and such date, this will be fully executed. It just seemed like something that I think, the chief also agreed, that is something that she would like to see done. So, I mean, there was plenty of support for it. Seems like the question is how and when and what sort of needs to happen in order to get there. And I think those things remain to be seen. At least that was the impression that I got. I would also just add briefly, Jeff, to your earlier point about probation data, the data that we currently, get from probation, the data that had me at that same meeting, right, talking to the PPC about the requests made by this body for accommodation for probation for for their transparency and overall helpfulness. In the data subcommittee meeting, the most recent one, we were talking about sort of bringing the website, the data website up to speed with all of that information, with Denise recommending that it all be aggregated so that you have, rather than each quarter as a separate document, you have something that kind of shows over a significant period of time, like a year and a half, that we've been sort of getting that information somewhere around there, what the trends have been, what that's looked like overall, which could be really helpful information, and perhaps something that we want to follow up on and get done to have the next iteration of the forum at some point in the near future.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention, this is Melvin Russell with probation, that the place for our job was going, we discussed it in our executive team meeting, and I know our chief is going to reach out to the CAO office to see if there was a timeline of where, it was going to end up before the new office and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully I get more information in the coming days to see if there's been any sort of further discussion with the chief and the CAO's office.
Thanks, Melvin. And Chris, right, for the further context on when perhaps we might be able to expect it, and what that is looking like in terms of certainty, next steps. So I guess I'd take from it, it seems like if when this change happens, that it would facilitate there being more streamlined, better capture and the ability to analyze. And also, my little summary would be that we can't wait in the meantime, right? So that to the extent that any parties, sheriff, probation, district attorney, any of the agencies are inclined to share the information that they can. And I know some of that has already happened, but also I think what information could be shared with, for example, Burns and other data partners to analyze, even if it's not coming through probation. There are ways, I think, where parties are willing and motivated to work with the data that is depersonalized. So I think as a structural thing, it would be, that makes sense. And also, I think there's a lot that we can do within the current confines. That said, it would be imperfect, but just looking at the data that's here, I know that, and these are all public websites, there's material that exists that is being shared already publicly. So anything that's already out there in some other space, it seems to me that at a minimum, that should be able to be shared between partners, and that's not looking in different sources for discussions of, could we even generate, or do we have this information? If it's already being published in another sphere, that we really need to tie that up so that we're being as efficient and getting all the info that is presently there. I'm just going to share these links to, where was I getting that information? And all of this is just digging around on the BSCC website. And there's a lot more that is there, but it seemed to me a place that would be appropriate to start. I think it's also appropriate for me to note a correction on my part. When I was at the meeting, and I think it was actually the quarterly meeting of our RJOB, I had indicated that my review of the Northern California ACLU website had data that had been published through Public Records Act requests, and it included information from a database from the Contra Costa County District Attorney's Office. All right, I was in error in that. As it turns out, looking through, and I give assist to Harlan Grossman on this, who followed up with me, he was at the meeting, that in fact, it was miscaptioned, or it was, the files were listed on the ACLU website as Contra Costa County, and actually the search return was Contra Costa County, dates through blah, 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 but that was Calusa. So however it came on the ACLU website was not in fact Contra Costa County data. So I was premature or in error in saying there's evidence of this Justware software. Perhaps it's not in Contra Costa County. The information I was seeing was misattributed to our county. It might well be that Contra Costa does have such database management software, but I don't want to be just left saying something that now I've learned is inaccurate. So for anyone who was following that point of right land, I was saying that there was this database system. I don't actually know that based on what I've now been corrected in learning what exists in software management. So that's on the DA front and data and just my correcting what I had said. Imala, I saw that you had shown your video, but I'm not reading into it. I'm just inviting if anyone had comment that they wanted to make. Okay. Right. Maybe I'm looking at where we are. We got about 15 minutes left. We have other items on our agenda, of course, and kind of talking about our planning moving forward. So I'm tempted to go there, and also don't want to shut this down prematurely. So if there's thoughts that anyone has on, right, there's some bigger points here of some structural change to how the staffing, I think, is an important point because it's our operations and how all that works. Beyond my just saying appreciation for ORJ, I think just recognizing that it would be a significant change in terms of how that would work. So I don't want to just gloss over that being something that we've raised here, as well as availability of data and how we push for more. If anyone, if no one has something more to say on at this moment on our review of the data, I would move ahead to the next agenda item unless someone wishes to raise something first. Okay. So let me then move to our next agenda item. Work plan. This is 25 through 29. Okay. Chris, can I invite you to kick off this agenda item? It's all right to say no.
Sure. No, it's fine. I was just getting an email at the same time. So the purpose of this agenda item, as many of you may recall, in the quarterly meeting, we said we wanted to review each subcommittee work plan and to attempt to prioritize work plan objectives that we feel like we can accomplish or make significant progress on within this year, right? Because we have all of your work plan objectives are developed directly from the RJTF recommendations. Those recommendations are pretty serious in size and scope. And so it can be really difficult to feel like you're progressing with the types of objectives, at least in some of the subcommittees that you have to work with. So it makes some sense to try to prioritize them. This is just meant to be a discussion, right, to talk about sort of what the objectives are, what the progress has been, and where we feel like, based on objectives that we still have outstanding, there is the most potential to accomplish something within the year in a meaningful way. So just really wanting to get you guys' feedback. In other subcommittee meetings, we've sort of walked through a little bit of what what the objectives are, sort of what the action steps have been or deliverables. I know that you all can read, and Jeff, I know that you're controlling the screen. So if you want to sort of walk us through some of these as you scroll, I think that would make sense. But really, the hope is that you guys are all clear on sort of where we are now and where we want to be by the end of the year in terms of what the priorities are and where we think there's potential for progress.
Thanks, Chris. That helps set the stage. And I'm thinking that, okay, so it was an update in terms of the staffing structure in the county. It may be also relevant for this discussion of, what is going to be our most likely success, or what's the chances of our actually having action on things. If there's any more content update from the Public Protection Committee meeting, and Chris, your presentation, I regret having not been able to be there, but I guess my mind is going to Oversight, Sheriff Oversight, and our technical assistance funding requests. Those were things that we had flagged for supervisors' consideration. Were those touched on at all at the PPC meeting?
Yeah, they were touched on. I think in addition to sort of bringing them up and highlighting, both of those things for the PPC. As I told you guys I would, I was also pointing to the fact that we need multiple standing meetings, like at least 2 a year, so that you guys can have this direct conversation and say, well, this is what that conversation was. Because in a meeting like the one in question, I'm sort of highlighting the progress of the whole year, right? So it's hard to give a whole lot of context when I'm sort of trying to give a summation of what you've done. And you could, in real time, with more sort of dialogue and support of or against whatever the topic may be, have a detailed discussion and provide context directly to the PPC and or BOS as they, deliberate on these things and make, the ultimate decisions. But yeah, we did talk about them. I remember that there were some questions and some next steps laid out, from the board's standpoint about the sheriff's oversight. And one of the things that they mentioned that I almost forgot, thank you for prompting me. We may well have to revisit this particular agenda item next month. But one of the things that they mentioned that I think you really want to pay attention to is looking at models that may exist in other parts of the state for what that board looks like. I think there's already going to be some research that's being done, or that they were, reaching out to support staff to say, like, let's see if we can get some models. But also, the overall sentiment was, and we'd also be open to, if the body has information about models that are out there that they might like to see, replicated to some degree. And so I think that is, just a worthwhile agenda item to really think about, and to reach out to contacts if necessary in other parts of the state that may either be in the process of developing something like this or have it in place already. So that was and I think there's at an upcoming meeting, I want to say maybe a May meeting, but I could be wrong, that this may be discussed. I think at an upcoming meeting, they're going to want to have more of a conversation about this and hear some of that information about what some of those models may be. So that should be coming within the next month or two, or somewhere in that range. So just something to think about and to be paying attention to. I think with the Community Capacity Fund, I think they appreciated the sentiment that we need help to sort of set this up. But I think what I realized hadn't been done. So I think this group came up with some guidelines for that. I don't know that those guidelines ever went to the full body to vote on, or if they did, it was kind of rolled into the we need technical assistance. And so that's information that I think the PPC hasn't seen, and that I'm not certain it was voted on as much as it led directly to the discussion that was, should we go for technical assistance to help set this up? And so I think, you know, that information would be helpful to provide some context for what it is that you want to do, how you envision it operating, which we know within this group is like a 2-tier hybrid system with some intensive programming and training for the groups that are going to get the larger sum. And I described that, but I think they hadn't seen or heard that information, which is again why I would strongly recommend that we open those lines of communication and have those direct sort of feedback loops, so that they're not hearing these things from me for the first time. Like, oh, that's interesting, I guess. Like, what are you talking about? So I think that's a huge next step. And they are, so the PPC, I would also say, was very open and welcoming to the idea of trying to set some standing meetings. There are a number of ways we could do that. They were like, we could, come to a quarterly meeting, or you guys could come to a PPC or board meeting. We could do both, you know what I mean? They're pretty open to it. I just think we need to kind of figure out what we want to propose, at least, for how to do that. Maybe an agenda item for the next quarterly, to figure out what we think that could look like, or what folks are willing to agree to in terms of timeframes and dates, and then just sort of send that information over and see if there's some cohesion there. But I think there was interest, or intrigue with technical assistance provider to help set up the fund, but not a lot of information about what the fund was supposed to be and what it was supposed to look like, which would be needed before that could really move forward. And I'm gonna, because one good turn deserves another, I'm going to call out Jill to see if she had any further recollections about those particular items in the feedback.
Happy to be called on anytime, Chris, no problem. Yeah, so the PPC directed Paul Ray's staff to go to the sheriff, go to county council, run the request for that legislation, and to come back at a future PPC meeting. I'm not sure if it's maybe May, I can't remember which one they said, but probably too soon for April, with a full presentation on what that looks like. So I think it is important that members of the RJOB be in that meeting to help explain, what it is that you're looking for. I mean, that's very common for advisory body members to be present and discuss any issues before the various committees. And yeah, they're open to, meeting with the RJOB if that's something the RJOB is interested in, or having a presentation from the RJOB at any future PPC meetings. I know my boss is going to be at a Integrated Pest Management Advisory Committee meeting next month. So, I mean, it's not an uncommon thing for supervisors to come to meetings where their input is requested. So.
Thank you, Jill. And thank you, Chris, for both giving context on what more was at the PPC meeting. And right, and I suppose in response to both, I think, yeah, we should take up the opportunity to have, not overdo it, but more than annually have some sort of check-in, so that there isn't the need to update on everything, which is not going to allow the sort of detail we need, and just to have a more back and forth. So I guess I would float the concept, and we probably should address it next time because we're nearly out of time, that if the supervisors can find a time, one and or both, to come to one of our meetings, perhaps that would be most doable and that we have, well, we could have delegates that come to a supervisor space, but I know that we've had our challenges in meeting quorum and getting everybody to our regular scheduled times. I am a little concerned about our ability to all meet up and find a time where we can be there at a separate community space. But that said, let's come back to this in terms of how we can have more regular link up, if that's our visiting or inviting a visit. Plus, on the technical assistance, my memory is, and I guess the bottom line is that the supervisors didn't have the info that they needed in order to take the action at this last meeting. I remember that we did include at our quarterly, this is the model. So where we were asking for is first approval, buy-in from the full RJOB in having this two-tiered process, and that it was going to have these different components. And having approved that, we also agreed that there would be funding tied to it. So I think in the sense of like, has this even been vetted by the RJOB to come to the supervisors? Yes, I believe it has. And now they need to actually have the chance to get the content and look at it. But I think we've cleared that kind of procedural part to move it forward. And regarding the models, that is good for us to have in mind. Also something that I think we should touch on here at our next subcommittee meeting, as like we were talking about the importance of following up on the things that came from the data meeting, that it wasn't just we checked that off the list. That's a follow through on something that came from our discussion there. And I know that if we look back at some of our old racial justice task force agenda packets, we had several sessions on this because it was a disputed point throughout of whether there would be such a thing and what it might look like. So as the discussions of recommendations, would there even be such an oversight thing? We had more than one session that was devoted to that concept of what are the different models. And I recall someone coming from Santa Clara who had been on a supervising type of role and talking about their model, but that was in the context of others. So we can try to use what we've already learned as content discussion and also have something more updated and solid since this legislation, now knowing that there is subpoena power, what that might look like. So that brings us to the very last minute. We have, of course, our plan to go through. We've kind of served it up what the idea is and isolating important issues. And we've done some of that from the data session. But I think we do need to leave it there so that we respect everybody's time and complete here. We will pick up on all of these, well, not all of these, but on the points that we've raised at our next subcommittee meeting, which will be next month. And I'll ask if anyone has a last word that they want to add. This is a moment to do so. I appreciate you all. Thank you for continuing to show up and do this work. Incremental, but we're making progress. I see it as I stand back. So onward, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody. Thanks again, Chris.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.